There are moments in life when God doesn't hand us comfort. He hands us bread that must be broken. This bread represents the essence of who we are, our dreams, our identity, our faith, our love. When the soul feels shattered, when the heart feels torn, that's not the end. It's the sacred moment when heaven begins to multiply what we thought was lost. Just like Jesus broke the bread before it fed the multitudes, your soul must sometimes be broken before it can feed your destiny. Before Jesus ever broke the bread, he blessed it. That small, sacred detail in Scripture carries a profound mystery about how God works with our lives. The blessing always comes before the breaking. In every season of pain, loss, or confusion, there is a divine order at work. God never allows something to be broken that he has not already blessed. That means the moment you enter a season that feels like crushing or tearing apart, heaven has already spoken favor over you. You might not see it, but before the breaking began, there was a blessing resting on your life. Think about that for a moment. Before the bread could feed the multitude, it had to be lifted, blessed, and then broken. The same pattern unfolds in every believer's journey. God often takes what we offer him, our talents, our dreams, our plans, and he lifts them up, acknowledging them with love. Then, to our surprise, he allows them to be broken. But this breaking isn't an act of cruelty. It's a divine act of preparation. It's the way he multiplies what we've given him. The pain of the breaking season isn't proof that you're forgotten. It's proof that you've been chosen for a greater purpose. When life breaks you, it's easy to feel as if you've failed, as if you've missed the blessing. But what if the breaking is the evidence that the blessing is already upon you? The soil must break before the seed can rise. The shell must crack before the chick can breathe. The night must fall before dawn can break through. There is always a divine order, blessing, then breaking, then multiplication. God doesn't bless you after the pain, he blesses you through it. We often pray for blessings, but resist the breaking that follows. Yet every story of transformation in Scripture follows this rhythm. Joseph was blessed with a dream, but before the fulfillment came, he was broken by betrayal and prison. David was anointed as king, but before the crown came, he was broken in caves and hunted like a criminal. Jesus was declared the beloved Son of God, but before the resurrection, he was broken on the cross. Each time, the blessing was already declared before the breaking began, and in each story, what looked like loss was simply the preparation for greater influence, greater purpose, and greater glory. The breaking season is where God reshapes our hearts. It's where pride is replaced by humility, fear is replaced by faith, and control is replaced by surrender. We think we're losing something, but in truth, we're gaining what truly matters. The breaking strips away what cannot remain so that what is eternal can emerge. It's like a potter reshaping clay. He must press and mold it before it can become the vessel he envisions. The breaking is not rejection, it's refinement. You are not being destroyed, you are being distributed. God is positioning you to pour into others, to release something greater than yourself. Let's imagine a simple story that captures this truth. There was a young woman named Sarah who had dreamed all her life of becoming a worship leader. She had talent, passion, and faith. She served diligently in her church, believing that her breakthrough would come soon, but instead of open doors, she faced disappointment. Her mentor moved away, opportunities closed, and she felt unseen. One night, she sat at her piano, tears streaming down her face, feeling completely broken. "God, I thought you called me," she whispered. In that quiet moment, she sensed a gentle whisper in her heart. "I did. But I'm blessing you through this breaking." In the months that followed, Sarah stopped chasing positions and started simply worshiping at home. Her songs became raw, full of honesty and pain, yet drenched in hopes. A friend recorded one of her sessions and shared it online. That simple, heartfelt song began touching thousands around the world, people who were walking through their own breaking seasons. What Sarah thought was the end of her calling became the beginning of her ministry. Her breaking became her blessing, and her blessing became nourishment for others. That's the divine pattern. What feels like a breaking moment is often the preparation for your greatest multiplication. When you're being broken, you're being made ready to feed others, to pour out from a deeper well, to live from authenticity rather than performance. God never breaks what he has not first blessed, and He never blesses what He does not intend to use for His glory. So if you're walking through a season of breaking right now, lift your eyes. Remember that the blessing is already upon you. The breaking does not disqualify you. It confirms that you are in the hands of the Master. Trust the process. The very area that feels shattered today will one day become the story that sustains others. The blessing came before the breaking, and what comes after will be far more than you could ever imagine. Brokenness is the language of transformation. It is the sacred vocabulary through which heaven rewrites the human heart. When we experience moments of deep pain, loss, or disappointment, it can feel as though life is punishing us, stripping us of everything we thought we needed to stand strong. But in reality, pain is not punishment. It is process. It is the process by which the soul is refined, reshaped, and reawakened to its divine purpose. God does not break us to destroy us. He allows the breaking so that His presence can flow freely through the cracks. What we perceive as weakness often becomes the very space through which grace and healing pour into our lives. Transformation rarely happens in comfort. Growth is birthed in pressure. Change is birthed in breaking, and faith is birthed in the tension between what we believe and what we see. The seasons that crush us are often the ones that awaken us. When everything feels like it's falling apart, God is often bringing everything into alignment. It is in those raw, vulnerable places, the ones we'd rather hide, that the deepest transformation takes root. The world teaches us to hide our pain, to cover our scars, to present an image of perfection. But heaven works differently. God uses the very things we try to conceal as instruments of transformation. When something inside you breaks, you begin to see differently. You start valuing presence over performance, authenticity over appearance, and grace over perfection. Brokenness humbles the proud heart and softens the hard one. It removes the illusion of control and replaces it with dependence on God. The moment you stop trying to fix yourself and start allowing Him to shape you, that's when real transformation begins. The cracks in your soul become windows for His light to shine through. You no longer need to pretend to be whole. You become whole through your honesty. Transformation through brokenness doesn't happen overnight. It's not a single event, but a sacred unfolding. You learn to breathe again, to hope again, to love again, even after being hurt. You learn that being broken doesn't mean you're useless. It means you're being remade. Just like gold must pass through fire to be purified, your soul must sometimes pass through pain to be perfected. Every tear shed, every piece shattered, every moment of confusion becomes part of a larger redemption story. God never wastes pain. He repurposes it. The place where you've bled the most can become the place where others find healing. Consider the story of a man named Daniel. He was a successful business owner, respected, confident, admired by many. From the outside, his life looked perfect, but inside, he was driven by fear, the fear of failure, the fear of losing control, the fear of not being enough. When a sudden economic collapse hit his company, Daniel lost almost everything. His business failed, his savings were gone, and his identity, once tied to success, crumbled. For months, he lived in a fog of shame, anger, and grief. He felt broken beyond repair. One evening, while sitting alone in his empty office, Daniel began to pray, not a polished prayer, but a raw, tear-filled cry for help. In that vulnerable moment, he felt something shift inside him. He realized that his worth had never been in what he built, but in who he was. The breaking had stripped away his pride, but revealed his purpose. Over time, Daniel began volunteering at a local shelter, using his skills to help others start small businesses. He found joy not in profit, but in people. The same man who once feared losing control now lived with open hands. His brokenness had birthed transformation, not just in his circumstances, but in his character. That's what brokenness does. It doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you are. It makes you softer, wiser, and more compassionate. You begin to recognize that everyone carries unseen pain, and you stop judging people by their behavior and start understanding their brokenness. You become less interested in appearing strong and more passionate about becoming real. The walls that once kept others out begin to fall, and suddenly your story becomes a bridge for someone else's healing. When God allows your soul to break, He is not rejecting you. He is refining you. Every wound becomes a doorway for wisdom. Every scar becomes a testimony that beauty can rise from ashes. The world doesn't need your perfection. It needs your honesty. It needs people who aren't afraid to say, I've been broken, but I've also been healed. When you speak from that place, your words carry power, your compassion carries weight, and your presence carries peace. So if you find yourself in a season where life feels heavy, where dreams have crumbled and strength is fading, know this: brokenness is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of transformation. Let your tears water the soil of your new beginning. Let your weakness become the space where God's strength is revealed. You don't have to have it all together. You just have to stay open. Because when the soul breaks open, heaven pours in. And through that breaking, you will discover that the very place that once felt like your undoing has become the sacred ground of your rebirth. When Jesus broke the bread, he didn't eat it alone, he gave it away. That small but powerful act reveals a deep truth about life and faith. What God does in you is never meant to stay only with you. Every tear, every scar, every painful season has the potential to become nourishment for someone else's soul. The bread of your soul, your story, your journey, your wounds is meant to feed others. You may not always understand why you went through certain things, but when you hand your broken pieces back to God, he multiplies them into hope for others. The places that once represented loss and pain become the very places where someone else finds strength. When life breaks us, our first instinct is often to hide the fragments, to cover our pain, or to pretend that we are whole. But God does something miraculous when we stop hiding. He takes what has been broken and uses it to bless others. Your vulnerability becomes someone else's breakthrough. Your testimony becomes a mirror of possibility for the one who feels hopeless. The very moment you thought was your ending can become the seed of life in someone else's story. This is the mystery of grace. It multiplies in the sharing. When Jesus blessed and broke the bread, it was not for himself, it was for the crowd. In the same way, when you've walked through hardship and come out on the other side, your experience carries power. It carries the fragrance of endurance, the wisdom of pain, and the strength of faith refined by fire. And when you speak from that place, people listen differently. They can sense that your words aren't theories, they're truth tested by tears. God never wastes pain, because pain redeemed becomes purpose. Sometimes we think that ministry means preaching, singing, or leading, but the greatest ministry is often lived quietly. When you show up for someone in their darkness and say, I know how that feels. I've been there. And you will make it through. That is breaking the bread of your soul. It's choosing to share from your brokenness instead of hiding it. It's realizing that your healing becomes a gift when it's given away. You don't have to have it all together to be a blessing. In fact, your cracks make the light of God's love more visible. There's a beautiful example of this in the life of a man named Ethan. Years ago, he lost his wife in a tragic car accident. For months, he lived in silence, withdrawing from everyone who tried to comfort him. He felt shattered, questioning his faith and wondering why God had allowed such pain. Slowly, over time, as he sat in prayer and grief, something began to change inside him. He realized that although he was broken, he was not abandoned. The same God who allowed his pain was gently holding his heart together piece by piece. One day, Ethan met a young man at church who had just lost his mother and was drowning in sorrow. Instead of offering polished advice, Ethan simply sat with him and shared his story, the anger, the loneliness, the long nights of weeping, and the quiet moments when he began to sense God's nearness again. That conversation changed everything for the young man. He said, "Hearing your story gave me hope that I can survive this too." Ethan walked away that day realizing that his pain had found purpose. The bread of his broken soul had become nourishment for another. He didn't preach a sermon or quote a verse. He just offered his story, and that story became life to someone else. This is what happens when we refuse to waste our pain. When you choose to share what God has done in your life, even in your brokenness, it multiplies beyond what you can see. Sometimes your smile after surviving heartbreak is enough to remind someone that joy is still possible. Sometimes your faith in a season of uncertainty teaches others what trust really looks like. And sometimes your silence, your quiet presence beside someone else's suffering becomes the greatest gift of all. Your story, no matter how messy or unfinished, carries power. It carries traces of God's grace woven through every struggle. What you think of as an ordinary life may be someone else's miracle in motion. The people around you aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for proof that redemption is real. And your story provides that proof. When Jesus gave the broken bread to his disciples, he was showing us the pattern of divine multiplication. The bread didn't multiply in his hands. It multiplied as it was given away. In the same way, your influence, your impact, and your healing grow when you begin to share them. The more you give, the more God multiplies. What once felt like a broken piece of your life becomes a masterpiece in his hands, a story so powerful that it feeds generations beyond your own. So don't hide the places where you've been hurt. Don't silence the lessons that came from your darkest nights. Someone, somewhere, is starving for the hope that only your story can give. Offer your broken bread with humility and trust that God will multiply it. What you thought was loss will become life. What you thought was the end will become someone else's beginning. Because in God's kingdom, the fragments still feed the multitude, and your broken piece is still a masterpiece. Every breaking leads to multiplication. It's a mystery woven into the heart of God's nature. What he touches never stays the same. When something is placed in his hands, no matter how small, how fragile, or how broken, he transforms it into something greater than it was before. We often see breaking as loss, as the death of something we cherished, but in heaven's perspective, breaking is the doorway to expansion. When your heart breaks in God's hands, it's not being destroyed, it's being prepared to multiply. The same way a seed must split open in the dark soil before it can grow into something living and fruitful, our lives often must be broken open before we can bear lasting fruit. Multiplication doesn't come from comfort. It's born in surrender. When we hold tightly to our plans, our dreams, our strength, we limit what God can do. But when we let go, when we surrender even the broken pieces, he breathes on them and turns loss into legacy. The process may feel painful, but it's never wasted. Every tear you've cried becomes a seed planted in faith. Every wound becomes a womb for new life. What once felt like the end of something beautiful often becomes the beginning of something eternal. Think about the story of the 5 loaves and 2 fish. The miracle of multiplication didn't begin when the crowd ate. It began when Jesus broke the bread. It was in the breaking that the miracle was released. If he had kept the bread whole, it would have fed only a few. But once he broke it, it became enough for thousands. That's how God works with our lives. What we give him in wholeness, he blesses. But what we allow him to break, he multiplies. Many people pray for growth, for influence, for greater impact. But few realize that growth often comes through seasons of breaking. A dream may have to die before it's resurrected with greater purpose. A relationship may end before your true calling begins. A failure may crush your pride before it cultivates your humility. The breaking is the refining ground of abundance. The moments when you think you're falling apart are often the moments when God is expanding your capacity to hold more grace, more wisdom, more compassion, more faith. There's a beautiful example of this in the life of a woman named Alina. She had always dreamed of becoming a writer. She wrote poems and stories in her free time, but her life was filled with responsibilities, a demanding job, financial struggles, and caring for her ill mother. When her mother passed away, Alina felt shattered. Her world fell silent. For months, she couldn't write a single word. She thought she had lost not only her mother, but also the creative spark that once gave her joy. One day, while sorting through her mother's things, Alina found an old journal filled with handwritten prayers. Each page carried words of faith, hope, and gratitude, even in the midst of sickness. Something inside her broke open again, but this time not in despair. She began writing, not about success or beauty, but about grief, healing, and faith. She poured her pain onto the page, raw and unfiltered. Those writings became a small online blog that started reaching people who were also walking through loss. Within a year, thousands were reading her words daily. Publishers reached out. Her book, born from the ashes of her heartbreak, went on to touch countless lives. Alina's story illustrates a simple truth: what you surrender in your breaking season will never remain small. God multiplied her tears into testimonies, her pain into purpose, and her loss into legacy. That's what he does. Every heartbreak that you hand back to him becomes a seed that will one day bear fruit. When you're in the middle of a breaking season, it rarely feels like multiplication. It feels like reduction, like everything you've built is falling apart, like the foundation is cracking beneath your feet. But that's because multiplication often hides beneath loss. Before a seed can multiply, it must disappear beneath the soil. Before light can break the dawn, the night must reach its darkest point. The very pressure that breaks you is the same pressure that brings forth life. If you look back on your own life, you'll often find that your greatest growth came after your greatest breaking. The heartbreak that taught you compassion, the failure that taught you perseverance, the rejection that taught you faith, each one expanded your soul's capacity. You may have thought you were losing something, but God was enlarging you. He was increasing what you could carry. This is the redemptive rhythm of God's kingdom. Nothing that's surrendered stays small. When you place your pain in his hands, it doesn't shrink, it multiplies. Your story becomes a source of strength for others. Your weakness becomes a doorway for his glory. Every breaking becomes an invitation for divine multiplication. The bread that was once whole feeds thousands. The heart that was once whole touches generations. So if you find yourself in a season where everything seems to be breaking, remember this truth. Breaking is not the end, it's the beginning of abundance. Let your pain fall into his hands. Trust that he is not wasting it. The same hands that broke the bread are the hands that blessed it and gave it away. In his hands, your brokenness will not diminish you. It will multiply your impact. One day, you'll look back and see that what you thought was the breaking point was really the birthing point of something far greater than you could have ever imagined. Healing begins in surrender. It is one of the deepest and most paradoxical truths of life and faith. We live in a world that teaches us to fight, to push, to fix, to take control of our destiny. We are taught to stand tall and never bow down, to always find strength in our willpower and perseverance. Yet the healing of the soul doesn't come through striving, it comes through yielding. It begins the moment you stop fighting the breaking and start trusting the breaker. Surrender is not a sign of weakness, it's the highest act of faith. It means trusting that even when everything around you feels shattered, you are still held by hands that will never let you go. There comes a point in every person's life when control slips away. The plans you made unravel, the prayers you prayed seem unanswered, and your strength finally runs out. In that place, you discover a truth that's both painful and liberating. You were never meant to carry it all alone. God allows breaking not to destroy you, but to draw you closer. He doesn't demand your perfection, he desires your surrender. The moment you release your grip and whisper, God, I can't, but you can, something sacred happens inside you. The war within your heart quiets. The chaos of fear and worry begins to still. Peace starts to flood the very places that once felt unreachable. Surrender is alignment. It's bringing your will into harmony with God's will. It's the recognition that his ways are higher, his vision is clearer, and his timing is perfect even when it feels delayed. When you surrender, you shift from asking, why is this happening to me, to what are you doing through me? You move from resisting the process to resting in it. And in that resting, healing begins, not because the pain disappears, but because the pain is no longer your master. God has a way of gathering every broken fragment of your soul. He doesn't discard the pieces that you think are useless. He collects them tenderly, fits them together in a new design, and turns what looked like ruin into a story of redemption. The cracks in your life don't disqualify you. They're where his light shines through. Healing is never about becoming who you used to be. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. But that transformation can only start when you lay everything down, your pride, your fear, your timeline, and say, Here, Lord, all of me, even the broken parts. There's a story of a man named Isaac that beautifully illustrates this truth. Isaac had built a successful life, good career, healthy family, steady faith. But when his wife was diagnosed with a terminal illness, his world collapsed. He prayed, fasted, and pleaded for healing. When her condition worsened, his prayers grew desperate, almost angry. He couldn't understand why God wasn't answering. The night she passed away, Isaac felt his heart shatter completely. For months, he lived in bitterness, unable to pray or feel anything but loss. One night, unable to sleep, he went for a walk under a quiet sky. He stopped by a park bench, sat down, and finally whispered, "God, I don't understand you anymore." There was silence. Then, as tears ran down his face, he said something he had never said before, "But I still trust you." It wasn't a prayer of strength. It was a prayer of surrender. In that moment, something broke inside him, but it wasn't despair this time. It was the release of control. For the first time, he wasn't trying to fix his grief. He was offering it. That night, he didn't receive answers, but he received peace. Slowly, over the following months, he began to heal. He started volunteering at a hospice, comforting families walking through the same kind of pain he had endured. Through his surrender, his healing deepened, and his brokenness became a ministry to others. That's what surrender does. It doesn't erase the pain, but it redeems it. It turns your suffering into compassion, your loss into wisdom, your wounds into testimonies. When you give God your fragments, He doesn't hand them back glued together in their old shape. He crafts something new, something stronger, something that carries His fingerprints. True surrender isn't about giving up. It's about giving over. It's saying, "God, I don't have to understand it all to trust you with it all." It's choosing faith over fear, obedience over control, and peace over striving. It's allowing God to be God and resting in His character when His plan is still a mystery. The peace that comes from surrender is unlike any other. It's not the absence of trouble, but the presence of trust. Healing begins the moment you release your need to be in charge and allow the one who created you to carry what you can't. The soul mends not through resistance, but through rest. When you stop trying to hold yourself together and let God hold you, your heart begins to heal. Every surrendered tear becomes a seed of new life. Every time you choose trust over worry, strength quietly returns. So if you find yourself in a season where everything feels broken, don't rush to fix it. Release it. Place it in the hands of the one who knows how to bring beauty from ashes. You don't need to understand every reason. You just need to trust the Redeemer of reasons. Because when you finally surrender, you'll discover that healing was never far away. It was waiting right on the other side of letting go. So today, if you feel broken, don't hide your pain, offer it. Place the bread of your soul in God's hands. Let Him bless it, break it, and multiply it. Because the truth is, your greatest impact will not come from your strength, but from your surrender. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize the breaking of your soul was never your end. It was the sacred beginning of a life that could finally feed the world with hope, love, and faith.